Welcome to Indianomics. The first quarter GDP came in at 7.8%, much higher than Reserve Bank's forecast of 6.5% for the first quarter, market estimates of 6.8%, and the budget estimates of 6.3 to 6.8 for the full year. Now, while some of the positive surprise can be attributed to a 52% rise in government Capex in first quarter, rural prosperity because of excellent rains, economists say some of the positive surprise is because of the ultra-low deflator of 0.9%. This very low deflator explains why the nominal GDP at 8.8% is 1 percentage point below last year's 9.7%, but real GDP is up 1.3% over last year's 6.5%. To understand how the NSO calculates the GDP and what inflation indicators it uses, I have with me perhaps the best expert on the field, Mr. Saurabh Garg, Secretary, Ministry of Statistics. Mr. Garg, good morning, and thank you very much for sparing time for us.
Good morning. A pleasure to be here.
Well, so first, the economists charge straight away, let me start with that the low deflator is making the GDP look a little better than it is. Can you take us through how the MoSPI deflates or inflates the GDP collection?
Yes, of course. So for the quarterly estimates, we use the benchmark indicator method. So we have a set of indicators. For example, for crops, we have the production estimate on the agriculture side. On the fuel side, we have the production of coal, petroleum. We have cargo handled and a host of such indicators that we use. Some of these indicators, we have the production values or the volume indicator itself. And in some, of course, it's the value. So for those where we have the volume, we in fact inflate the actual numbers to get the nominal value. And for the value ones, we use a deflator. So around 40% of the total quarterly GDP that estimates, you calculate, around 40% we use volume estimates, and therefore we are first calculating the real GDP and we inflate that to get the nominal GDP. In the balance, we deflate it. Okay. Now, what is the deflator that we use? It's not that we use the entire CPI or the entire WPI number that you see. In the CPI, if you notice, we have a number of sectoral indicators. We have for housing, we have for education, yes. We have for health, and similarly on the WPI side also, we have inflators for manufacturing and other goods. So the sectoral indicators are used for that particular sector. So that, for example, if you look at the WPI sectoral indicator for fuel and power, it was in fact negative. For food, it was at a lower at 1.76%. And a combination of this is what is used, some to inflate and to get the nominal number. Where we have the nominal number, we use it to deflate. Now, the question that has been worrying a lot of people is why did we use such a low deflator? And that's a function of the actual inflation rates in the first quarter. So, and that's a direct result of the number of fiscal and monetary policies of the government. Let me just give a few interventions that the government took. For example, under the Bharat brand, since October 24, there have been retail sales of atta, rice, chana dal, etc., which is keeping food inflation low. There were stock limits introduced on wheat. There was reduction of customs duty in pulses and oil. There has been diversifying of fuel sources to keep prices in check. So therefore, and plus on the monetary side, of course, you are aware of the 100 points drop in the repo rate since the early this year. So if the inflation rates are low, they get reflected in the deflators, which I think is but natural.
Okay. No, that's a fair point, sir. A lot of effort, and even nature has blessed us with good rains, and even global WPI prices of metals, etc., were low. So that point is taken on WPI being negative. the question that I get from economists is that our GDP is composed 57% of tertiary sector, which are services. Many people consider even construction as a service only. So that makes it 66% coming from services. And we are deflating most of it with WPI, which, may over-deflate. Is that a worry that we are therefore, looking at a higher... because tertiary sector has given over 9% growth in real terms. And that may be because we are not deflating it enough. We're deflating it with WPI.
Yeah. So first, as I mentioned earlier, nearly 40% of the economy on a quarterly basis we estimate on volume indicators,
yes.
where in fact we calculate the real GDP first. So there's no deflator used in that, and there's no issue at all of whether the deflator is correct or not. So nearly 40% is that. And that includes some of the services also. For example, whether it's transport, construction services. Construction comprises a majority of cement and steel, which determines the cost of these services. In transport, we have the volumetric growth in rail, road, air cargo, etc. So some of the services do not need a deflator, and we calculate the real growth. Some of the services are captured in the CPI, and we use the sectoral deflator for that inflation index. Health, education, some of the personal services for which we have the relevant CPI for us. And in others, some we use the WPI. Let me just take trade services. The price of trades is based on the volume growth of goods, for which we have a very clear indicator, the volumetric growth. And it's only on top of that is the price of trading, if I can put it that way. And financial services, which form a significant part. Internationally, whether it's the IMF or the UN system, the non-financial sectoral deflators or an implicit deflator is used because a large portion of the financial services comprise of banking services, which are deflated and suggested to be deflated using such a sectoral non-financial deflator. So I would say it's incorrect to say that the entire 60% is being deflated by using a single number of WPI, when actually the actual story is much more granular, and we have adequate number of deflators. Obviously, we can make improvements in that, but I think we need to realize how actually it is done.
Now, I take your point, sir, that, internationally it is accepted. It is just that we have a large services component in our GDP, and we don't have a large services component in WPI at all. It is in WPI it is zero. In CPI, it is about 20%. So it looks inadequately deflated. But before I come to what changes we can, I just want to tell you what I get from the groundswell. If you speak to FMCG companies, and I didn't speak to any individual company because they could be mucking up their business. I spoke to Nielsen. They say that in the first quarter, the volume growth of FMCG consumption was 6%. Value was 9%, which is, nominal GDP. But volume, which is real GDP, was only 6%. Whereas we have a 7.8% growth. So it is not gelling with the real. Why is it not being felt at the ground level?
Yeah, so let me look at some high frequency indicators, since that's what. Look at gross GST collections in Q1 of FY25-26 compared to year-on-year last year, the Q1. For example, in April, we had 2.37 lakh crores, and if you look at the 3 months, April, May, June, compared to April, May, June of the last financial year, there is an 11.8% growth in GST. And GST comprises a large proportion of the economy, and our nominal growth is only 8.8%. Look at another indicator, e-way bills. In 25, it crossed for the first time the number of 12 crore, and in fact in July, it has crossed 13 crore. But you look at Q1 growth in e-way bills, April, May, June of this year compared to last year, it's a 20.5% growth in e-way bills. Look at another highest frequency indicator, UPI transactions, which in a way capture the velocity of money to some extent. August 20, of course, August this year, we crossed 20 billion transaction. In July, it was we crossed 25 lakh crores. But year on year, quarter, if you compare with last year's quarter, it increased by 21.6% in value and a whopping 37.5% in number. Now, these are three economy-wide indicators, high-frequency indicators, which actually show what kind of transactions are happening. So if you look at it in that context, and you look at, for example, what the industry brings out. I mean, we don't bring that out. That's the PMI of manufacturing, the PMI of services, the business analytic index. You look at all those numbers, and they are at 10-month highs, or the growth is extremely positive. I take your point that in the FMCG area, even the IIP shows a low growth. If you see the numbers of May, June, and then July, they are increasing. So there was a slight downward numbers in FMCG, but even they are improving. So the point I'm saying is you need to look at other indicators, and as a whole, look at how infrastructure has been doing under the IIP numbers also, and they are very extremely healthy. So there are large parts of the economy doing extremely well, and 8.8% numbers of nominal growth have to be seen in comparison with the growth in GDP of nearly 12%, e-way bills of 20%, UPI transactions of 22%.
I take your point. Actually, PMI is at a 17-year high for the month of August itself. So, much depends on what indicator you want to pick. We have a lot of corporate guests coming in. We have industry experts coming into the channel. We have bankers, and bankers keep saying RBI has given us a lot of money, but we don't know whom to give. Most people are not, checking our requirement in terms of creditworthiness. So there are those, worried voices as well. But I just want to tell you, again, coming back to, getting the services deflator right, I know that you have set in motion a lot of new ideas at the MoSPI. Are we going to have a PPI index? The advantage of a PPI over WPI is because a little bit of services comes in. Producers give you the price that they are getting the inputs at, which includes logistics, warehousing, transport, etc. So services gets included in PPI. Are we transiting to it so that we get, services included?
Yeah. So on the PPI, it's definitely desirable to have a PPI, and there is an expert group working on it, and it's made some considerable headway, and we expect that to happen soon. But let me put it out there that the WPI that we are calculating since 2011-12 had substantial changes from the one that was calculated in 2004-5 or earlier. And one of the basic changes done was that the WPI is calculated at the ex-factory price, at the basic price, and the taxes, indirect taxes, were removed from it. So it is not dependent on fiscal policy changes that might occur, but it is at the basic price. And the sectoral WPI that is calculated, that is identical to the PPI that would be calculated. The PPI, in addition, would have export prices, the export product prices. So to that extent, there will be some difference. And the WPI that we use, which is item-wise or sector-wise, is based on ex-factory price. I just wanted to mention that issue so that that clarity is there. And the second issue, which you alluded to earlier, is regarding the proportion of representation of services in the CPI. The CPI is calculated based on the products or services that consumers actually purchase. And it is based on the household consumption expenditure survey. So nearly 1/4 of the present CPI has services. There are in fact 62 items of services which are aggregated to 40 types of services in the present CPI. The base revision of CPI is underway and is expected early next year. And the weight would increase. And more importantly, the number of services would increase. There would actually be somewhere more than 92 odd items of services and 50 types of services. And I mean, let me just make one more point. For example, trade services, as I mentioned earlier, are based on the volumetric growth of the goods.
Yeah.
And we have good proxies for some of these services in the area, whether it's construction, whether it's transport, and as I mentioned, financial services in any case globally have a different method of looking. So we should not look at it services as an omnibus. We have areas where there are good indicators and some areas where some improvements can be made.
No, I take your point, sir. I mean, I read through your 2017 document and, number of minutes of telephone used, number of subscribers, all those are there in communication, railway tonnage moved, railway kilometers, passengers. So there are a lot of very legitimate volume numbers that you have. But as you pointed out, this volume is only available for 40% of the GDP. For the remaining, we have to go with NSE, BSE corporates. Okay, let me get another point in. The other issue is this double deflation. In some countries, they deflate the input prices, output prices, and get the value add. We are only deflating the top line. So the manufacturing, for instance, is a strong 7.7, something which didn't gel with the Economist poll that I did. So is there a double deflation also that we will include in the revised GDP?
Yes, I mean, that is something that we are moving towards, having either a double deflation where data is available or a volume extrapolation in which you calculate the real value of the GDP in any case initially and then go to the nominal value. On the double deflation, I must mention that it can go either way. It's not that always it will mean that the GDP is overestimated, because what do we do in the single inflation? We look at the GVA that is there and then deflate that based on the output prices. So based on separate how the movement of prices might happen separately on the input side and output side, the double deflation does not necessarily always mean that there would be a reduction in the real GDP compared to the normal GDP. So I think that realization should be there. And the second, in 40% of the GDP, in any way, we calculate the real GDP values.
Yes.
So therefore, the errors, if at all, there might be, it's not substantial to have any reasons to doubt the value of the real GDP growth, especially given the nominal numbers in other cases that I mentioned earlier.
No, I take your point. Actually, I overestimated it. I put that volume and constant prices inflated at 55%. As you say, volume is available for 40%. I should rectify that. So a quick break. I have a couple of more questions for you. Thereafter, I'll come back in a minute.